Welcome to Speaking of Pets.
We're the Novotny sisters from Cleveland, Ohio.
I'm Dr. Alice Novotny-Jeroman, a board-certified veterinary dermatologist.
And I'm not. I'm Janet Novotny-King, the doctor's sister, podcast co-host, pet owner, rescuer, and lover.
We're here to provide pet owners with science-based information to help them be the best pet parents they can be.
Here's today's episode, created just for you and your pets.
Today, we have a very special guest. We have Dr. Jennifer Larsen, who got her bachelor's and master's degree in animal science, and then her veterinary degree from UC Davis. She also has her PhD in nutritional biology. She's a board-certified veterinary nutritionist in the American College of Veterinary Internal Medicine. She's a lecturer, a researcher. She's a teacher. And I couldn't think of anyone more qualified to answer some of the questions we're getting from viewers. What's a good dog food? What makes a good dog food? What does premium mean? What is ultra processed? So I'm hoping we can get all of your questions in today. But like I said, I couldn't think of a better person to ask to be our guest today than Dr. Jennifer Larsen. Welcome.
Welcome.
Oh, thanks for having me. I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you.
Janet, why don't you start being the one of them, a person that asks all these questions?
Okay. There's a grain-free diet, ultra-processed, there's fresh food diets, there's the raw diet. I think there's something called the wolf diet. What do we do for our pets? What's the best thing for our pets?
That's a big question.
That's a loaded question.
I know.
But that's the consumer. When you go down that aisle,
Yeah.
and you get all those emails,
Yes.
and there's a lot out there.
It's completely overwhelming. There are so many different marketing categories and options, and everybody is telling you that they're the best and other diets might even be harmful. So unfortunately, I think fear and guilt are often used to market pet food, and that makes it even more confusing because once you start getting into that emotional part of making a decision, then you can't make a rational decision. And there is not enough transparency in the pet food industry. And it's really difficult for your average pet owner to determine what goes into this. Is this a marketing claim? Is this a regulatory claim? Is this a nutritional claim? And try to figure out what actually matters.
Well, and
you know when else guilt comes into play? Libby and the treat jar.
oh, because they look at you funny.
Well, yeah, I know. If I've been out all day, I'm like, I feel so guilty. I'm just going to give her one.
Well, it's funny that Dr. Larsen mentioned about the guilt and the fear. For example, we heard corn is bad. Corn is bad. And
Grain is bad.
Am I wrong? Corn is not bad.
No, every food that could potentially be in a pet food is going to bring more than one nutrient. And so they're going to be there because they have a purpose. So the more ingredients that are present in a food, they have to be functional. There are some things added to pet foods for marketing purposes because they have a health halo, for example, like a diet would have blueberries when it's providing a fraction of the calories and nutrients, but they're there because owners like to see them on the ingredient
That's called a
list.
health halo?
I love that term, health halo. Is that one of your a nutritionist claim? Like we derms have different claims too.
Yeah, it's used in human nutrition too, because so many foods are referred to as superfoods, or so something like acai berries or blueberry, usually more expensive, less accessible foods, because there is a little bit of elitism built in there too.
Okay, kibble versus fresh.
So those are both big categories with a lot of different options. And some people say fresh. That doesn't really have a regulatory definition or any other, it's a marketing term. So sometimes you can do a homemade diet. That's, one that you make at home with foods from your pantry and refrigerator. And then there's homemade style commercial diets as well. And they may be frozen, so they're not fresh. And certainly there are growing interest in that. There's a lot of marketing in those. They're increasingly popular, but they're often outrageously expensive. They're not accessible to everybody. And they tend to have a very negative environmental impact potentially. So that's definitely a concern, especially on that scale. And I do spend a lot of my time formulating home cooked diets for people because their pets have a combination of diseases where a commercial diet doesn't work, or they have a preference, either them or their pet has a preference for homemade foods. And that's a lower scale, but I do sort of struggle a little bit with that negative environmental impact there too. But there's nothing wrong with kibble. It's very cost effective, it's balanced, it's easy to adjust the amount if your pet's gaining too much or losing too much. And it's really a very straightforward, easy way to feed a pet. And the demonization of some of the more traditional pet foods is really sort of rooted in what we were just talking about in terms of health halos and a little bit of elitism. And people want to feel like they're really good pet owners, and they're sort of told that if they feed a certain type of pet food that their pet's going to live longer and be healthier and all of that. And that's really just an opinion at this point. We don't have any data to suggest that's actually true.
So, are there nutritional differences for cats and dogs? I'm not saying feed your cat dog food, but what are the differences?
Yeah, so cats have certain requirements that reflect their evolution as a carnivore. So they didn't have to make dietary selections for certain foods, and they didn't have to evolve certain metabolic pathways to make certain nutrients because they were always present in their diets, right? So they didn't have that sort of like pressure from an evolutionary perspective. So they do require more protein than dogs and people do. And there are other certain nutrients that they need. For example, they can't make enough vitamin A out of beta carotene, and we can. So certain examples like that, like they weren't eating colorful vegetables to get beta carotene, then they need to make vitamin A, right? The prey that they were eating had enough vitamin A in their liver. So they continue to need that as a dietary
Yeah, I'd like to
source.
see you feed my cats a carrot. That'd be a good one.
I have two questions. One, would you comment on an all meat diet? Because I remember when I was in an exam room and I had a gal that was fostering golden retrievers, okay, for a rescue, our local rescue. She was feeding raw venison. I just about, and so if you comment on that. And also, would you also comment when people buy a bag of dog food and then empty it into a plastic container?
Yeah, so an all meat diet is sort of just an ingredient based description. So you can essentially balance any diet that has the basic macronutrients, so protein, fat, etc. And so if you wanted to feed just muscle meat or muscle meat and organ or whatever, you can balance that, but you need to use supplements to do so. And so an all meat diet can be balanced. The potential downside of an all meat diet is it's going to be high in protein and high in fat, depending on the cut and type of animal and whether you're including skin and all those other things. But there's definitely going to be an expense to that. So protein is always going to be the most expensive part of a diet, both from a financial perspective and an environmental impact perspective. So that's a potential downside. But they do tend to be quite palatable for dogs and for cats. So that's definitely a consideration. You can make a
And
variety
what
of different
about
diets unbalanced.
buying the
So
pet? Okay, and what
There's
about
just
buying the pet food and opening the bag and getting rid of the bag?
yeah, absolutely. People should not do
Okay.
that. There is a lot of science and engineering actually that goes into pet food packaging. So if you're buying a kibble, you should keep it in the original package. You should try to protect the kibble from light and air as much as possible. And so a lot of bags will come in like some kind of resealable mechanism, so Velcro or a Ziploc zipper kind of feature or something, or you can fold it down and then put a bag clip on it. So it's just like cereal. So it doesn't really get stale the way that cereal or potato chips do, but you really want to protect the fats that are really sensitive to exposure to air and make sure that you're keeping it in the original container. You can put it in a secondary container,
In the
but keep
bag.
it in the whole
Okay.
bag to
I've
keep it
also
fresh.
read not to buy giant amounts, to buy it in
Yep,
small.
I
Do
agree
you
with
agree
that.
with that? Yeah, I started doing that. I have two Goldens, and I used to buy I don't know, 50-pound bag, and I thought, I listened to someone talking about fatty acid oxidation. And so now
Yeah.
I'm buying the smaller bags and doing what you said, opening them but keeping them in the bag and putting them in a container. Right.
I buy the big bag of
Yeah. I mean,
sheets
I
a
think
lot.
Yeah, well, you shouldn't buy more than like a couple of months of worth of
Oh,
food
yeah, yeah,
at
yeah.
the
Okay.
outside.
Okay.
And so, some of that is based in, um, the sort of downsizing of the size of the
Yeah.
bag you're
Yeah.
getting, but the cost is staying the same, that we're seeing in all of our consumer goods. But there's also a trend for people buying smaller
Yeah.
packages of pet food in general. That may be because we have a lot more people living in apartments
Oh,
or don't have all
true.
the storage
True.
space,
True.
or maybe they only have one dog instead of three or whatever. But definitely smaller bags will stay fresher longer.
Blue Buffalo natural veterinary diets offer a natural alternative in nutritional therapy. With their in-house research and development team with over 300 years experience in well pet and veterinary therapeutic diets, more than 600 scientific publications, and more than 50 U.S. patents. Blue Buffalo natural veterinary diets.
Hi everyone, I'm Larry. Some of you know me as Grandpa Larry, and I run Larry's Animal Safari on YouTube, where we share sweet and educational videos about baby gorillas, zoo animals, and the amazing teams who care for them. If you love animals of all kinds, I'd love to have you join us. You'll meet little ones like Jamila and Kayembe, learn how zoo families grow, and enjoy real moments that bring joy and curiosity to animal lovers everywhere. Just search Larry's Animal Safari on YouTube, or click the link in the show notes. New videos go up weekly, and each one supports awareness for animal care and conservation. Thanks to Speaking of Pets podcast for all they do. Now, let's get back to the show.
So what happens, what do I do if when I go to the vet and say my dog, Libby, gets some kind of condition and they have to change her diet? So how do you transition from old food to new food? What's the best method?
Yeah, so it a lot of that depends on why exactly you're changing and what diet you're changing to and from. And some of that is an individual decision based on your pet's like historical tolerance. So for example, I have a lot of clients who feed their dogs essentially something different for every meal, and their dog's GI system handles that just fine. Never have a soft stool. They don't have any trouble with that. And then I have other patients that need a 3-week transition very slowly, or things deteriorate. So there's something about the resilience and stability of their gastrointestinal tract that probably has a lot to do with their microbiome and the interaction with fibers and so forth in the diet. So sometimes I will make my recommendation based on what the owner tells me about their individual pet's resilience. But in general, a 7 to 10 day transition is sometimes what we want to do. In other cases, maybe the disease is diet responsive, and we think that the previous diet may have been promoting something like pancreatitis, and we really want to get them off of that high fat diet, for example. Then we would sort of risk a more abrupt
Is
transition.
there like a good housekeeping seal of approval equivalent for pet foods? Do you know what like?
Well, I mean, pet food is pretty highly regulated, even more than human foods in some respects. Um, but there's not really a approval process. And a lot of it is really up to the manufacturer to make sure that they're following all of those rules. So that's where some of the sort of distrust and lack of transparency comes into play, with owners being skeptical about certain brands or certain marketing categories or commercial food in general. So much of it is up to the pet food company. They have a lot of responsibility. The onus is on them. So they need to make sure that they have that responsibility. And the bigger, more experienced companies, they tend to be fairly risk averse and they're fairly conservative. So they are not making reckless decisions, that's for sure.
And Janet, you may not know this, but I'd love Dr. Larsen to comment on some of the bigger companies. Well, actually, it's probably all the bigger companies do food trials. Could you comment on that? Because sometimes when I read about food trials, what is it like? Is it 6 months or 6 weeks? And then they do a little bit of blood chemistries. And is that all that's involved? It doesn't seem to me to be extensive enough.
Huh.
Yeah, so what you're referring to is essentially in vivo testing for nutritional
Okay.
adequacy. And there's lots of different ways to do that. So, and nutritional adequacy is sort of a general term to refer to how the diet performs in the species and how well it supports a specific life stage. And so there are some companies that are potentially essentially just an office. So they don't have a manufacturing plant. They contract out all of their expertise. They don't have dogs and cats on staff. So all of that is sort of done on paper or through contract basis. And then other companies are more, I guess, vertically integrated, where they usually aren't going to own the raw materials chains probably, but they own their manufacturing plants. They have all in-house expertise. They have dogs and cats on staff. They're doing digestibility testing, palatability testing, more involved in vivo performance testing. And Alice, I think what you were referring to are sort of like the AAFCO feeding
Yes.
tests. And AAFCO is the Association of American Feed Control Officials. That's a sort of non-government organization that's made up of members that are state feed control officials. And every year, AAFCO publishes what they refer to as the official publication, or the OP. And the OP just consists of model feed laws. So AAFCO doesn't have any regulatory authority. They don't monitor, enforce, certify, approve anything. They just publish this OP and they're like, here's some model feed laws. And then the states decide whether they're going to adopt those in full or in part as their state feed control law. And then it's up to the states and the state feed control officials. So in California, we have the CDFA, the California Department of Food and Ag. Every state has their own unit for that. And then they're responsible for the monitoring and enforcement. Some of that is done at the level of the FDA as well. And the USDA is involved with import-export. But that's sort of how the regulatory structure works. It's a little bit complicated. So AAFCO guidelines, most pet food companies that are selling in multiple states are essentially going to conform to those guidelines, even though there's sort of this patchwork of who has adopted AAFCO versus not. And so AAFCO has a couple of different ways to prove a complete and balanced claim. And complete and balanced is a regulatory term. It has a definition. And in order to make that claim, a company either has to formulate their diet on paper using a calculation method to conform with the nutrient levels in that official publication.
Using a nutritionist or no?
Nope. And they don't even have to use a laboratory. They don't have to test the food at all. They can do it all on paper.
Wow. So they just
Or
create
they
a
have to
recipe
actually
and then
feed
figure out
it.
the nutritional.
Yeah, so they can use the nutritional profiles of the base ingredients, and then in the inclusion rates in that mixture, figure out what the diet's nutrition profile is. The alternative is to use AAFCO feeding test. They differ depending on the life stage in terms of the length and that kind of thing, but those requirements are minimums. Companies are more than welcome and encouraged to go longer, have more animals, add more testing, et cetera. Somehow that's not often what companies that have criticisms of the AAFCO feeding test do. They just resort to the formulation method, which can be appropriate in some cases if the company has a really good idea already of how their typical raw ingredients work in their specific processing scheme, because every processing, the amount of steam that they're adding, how they're cooking it, the different combinations, all those are going to be behaviorally different from company to company. So the company has to have a really good idea of how that's going to work. But ideally, they should be formulating to AAFCO or better, and then doing at least some kind of in vivo testing to really provide some level of confidence that there's some nutritional adequacy going on.
Wow.
Now, Janet, you probably don't know about this, but I know Dr. Larsen does. In the two big situations that we had, the cyanuric acid episode and then the vitamin D episode, and I'm not going to mention the companies because there's no reason to, but because of that, are most
Wait,
or
one
all
second.
food companies now?
Was there too much in the food or something?
Yeah, it was fatal to some.
So it was like
pets.
a recall.
Well, yeah, but what happened was the food companies weren't checking their sources of the products that of the ingredients that came in. So is that mandatory now, or is it still elective that if I'm a food company to check, hey, this is the right amount of vitamin D in what I'm buying? You see what I'm saying, Dr. Larsen?
Well, I mean, they have to guarantee a certain nutritional profile in their diet. And the quality control at the level of raw material selection and inclusion rates, again, a lot of that is up to the company.
Okay.
But what happened with the melamine and cyanuric acid thing, that was intentional fraud. And it actually affected like milk replacers for babies too. Like
Right.
people died from that.
Yes.
It was a huge
Yeah.
thing. And so we didn't know that those two things together were toxic. So nobody was testing for them at that time. So now it's part of the general toxicology
Okay.
screen that's going on, in addition to aflatoxin and lots of other things. So companies have different levels of quality control depending on what their internal processes are. But they're all going to have some level of quality control for that.
I've read that some of the smaller pet food companies don't have quality control. Am I wrong there? Are you required to
Well,
have
I mean,
quality control as a pet food manufacturer?
not really. I mean, they're required to have some kind of a assurance that whatever guarantees they're making on their label are true and can be substantiated. So, and at the level of the FDA is very interested in consumer protection and those kinds of things, and they do have the ability to force a recall, although most recalls are voluntary. Often initiated by the FDA, but sometimes initiated at the level of the company if they find something wrong, like a deficiency or a toxicity, or some kind of contamination. Because there are sometimes things make it into pet food that are not allowed to be
Right.
there. Like, animals that are euthanized with pentobarbital. Pentobarbital should not be in pet food. There's a zero tolerance policy, and it's really up to the company to make sure that that's not happening and that their raw materials are coming from the right streams. They're still considered edible. But it still happens sometimes, and that's ultimately the fault of the company. The responsibility is on them.
Wow. We are putting a lot of faith in these companies when you think about it. I mean, these are our children, these pets. And you're putting that in their bowl every day and assuming that everything's hunky-dory.
But we do the same for
Yeah.
human
Yeah.
food too.
Yeah, true. But
do.
here's the difference,
Yeah.
Janet. As humans, we can pick and choose. The pet
No,
takes
right.
whatever we give it.
And the pet can't verbalize they're not feeling well, right? If they're eating a particular
What is
food.
human grade? Can you define that?
There's human grade pet food?
Yes.
Okay.
That's thrown
Yeah,
around a lot.
it's just a regulatory designation. It doesn't mean anything with regard to quality or nutritional
Okay.
content or anything like that. It's just who is regulating the pet food. That's all it means.
Wow.
But that term has a health halo.
It does. Yes. Boy,
So-
there's a lot of those halos out.
At what point, would my veterinarian recommend a veterinary nutritionist for my pet, for my dog?
Sometimes that's going to happen if you need a home cooked diet or you want to do a home cooked diet. There are a couple of online sources to get sort of semi-individualized recipes. But most of the recipes that are available online and in books are problematic. Often they're too vague in the instructions for the ingredients or supplementation or preparation or how many calories the recipe makes or whatever. But in my opinion, the biggest advantage of doing a home cooked diet is the ability to customize it. So if you're using a generic recipe, you're losing that advantage.
Yeah.
And so we're often called on to get involved in cases when a pet has several different diseases. So there's lots of comorbidities where you sort of have this balancing act of trying to do maybe a diet that's appropriate for kidney disease, but maybe there's also a food intolerance and they need to avoid certain ingredients or something like that. So those combination of diseases, there are very few, if any, commercial options. And then I certainly have lots of pet owner clients who want to cook for their pets, or maybe there's a behavioral reason. There's a lot of diseases associated with the pet's not feeling well, and maybe they get a food aversion and they won't eat the appropriate diets. And I think that in veterinary medicine, we are getting better at this, but the caregiving burden that a lot of our pet owners have to be involved in and take on to take care of a really complex case. And they're spending sometimes hours a day trying to feed their pet something their pet doesn't love. And so my challenge is trying to make a diet that's medically appropriate, but also really palatable. So I have some tricks that I use, and that's really one of the things that I spend a lot of time thinking about.
I bet.
Wait, I tried to use the
opinion
stinky
matters a
cat
lot.
food to get the cat down from the tree, and the golden retriever came in with the can empty.
Hey, did you know that Blue Buffalo makes prescription diets that are formulated by animal nutritionists and veterinarians? And they're used for dietary needs such as kidney support, gastrointestinal support, weight management, and our favorite, allergy and skin problems. They make a food allergic diet that's an alligator based called NP or a hydrolyzed salmon based for dogs and cats called HF. So please ask your veterinarian about Blue Buffalo prescription diets.
Hi everyone, I'm Larry. Some of you know me as Grandpa Larry. And I run Larry's Animal Safari on YouTube, where we share sweet and educational videos about baby gorillas, zoo animals, and the amazing teams who care for them. If you love animals of all kinds, I'd love to have you join us. You'll meet little ones like Jamila and Kayembe, learn how zoo families grow, and enjoy real moments that bring joy and curiosity to animal lovers everywhere. Just search Larry's Animal Safari on YouTube or click the link in the show notes. New videos go up weekly, and each one supports awareness for animal care and conservation. Thanks to Speaking of Pets podcast for all they do. Now, let's get back to the show.
Well, after just losing one of my 22-year-old Capri to kidney disease, I just donated literally cases of canned, you name the manufacturer, I had it of renal diets. And I'll tell you, Dr. Larsen, at the end, I just wanted her to eat anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's very common.
And she did. There's nothing more frustrating and sad than you open this up. Okay, I'm going to try this one, and they sniff and maybe take a little, and they turn their nose up, and I would never complain about my dog or cat eating too much ever again, because the worst part is when they won't eat anything, because then the end is near. That has to be a challenge for you.
Yeah, there are lots of reasons why pets don't want to eat enough or enough of an appropriate diet at least. And kidney disease is a really common one. Because of the really important jobs that our kidneys do, we sort of take them for granted until they stop working, and then we realize. And so animals that have kidney disease are often dehydrated, and that makes you feel awful, right? We've all experienced that. Maybe they're anemic. Again, they feel weak and icky. They have high levels of acid in their blood, so they don't feel that great. And then the sort of circulating chemicals that our kidneys usually are responsible for removing and putting into our urine, they're affecting the brain, which affects the appetite center and the nausea centers and those kinds of things. And so people that are dialysis dependent have reported that foods don't taste and smell the way that they did before, either because of the disease itself or because of some of the treatments that we're giving them. I think that, once people started hearing about COVID affecting the sense of smell and taste, we have a little bit more empathy for that now, because it's something that we've heard about recently. And so they have a lot of reasons not to eat well. And so the rotation strategy that you were describing can work for a lot of pets to keep them eating more for longer. We also have some really good appetite stimulant drugs now that we can use, more than we had 10 years ago. And then we also really aggressively use feeding tubes for those patients. And sometimes owners get a little uncomfortable with that idea of having a device in their pet, and it's usually an esophagostomy tube that's into the side of their neck. But we've gotten much better at placing those. They're very easy to place. There's cute little collars that give little bow ties and other things that'll make them a little bit more palatable, if you will, for pet owners.
We did that in our turtles. When I help out in wildlife rescue, we did a lot of those tubes in turtles. Yeah.
It makes it easy to give them water, keep them hydrated. You give them medicine, so you don't have to struggle giving them pills, give them food. And we do a lot of feeding tubes in our hospital. We're really aggressive with using feeding tubes. And basically the pet can eat what they like, so they can still eat with the feeding tube in place. And whatever part of the diet they don't like goes into the tube. And it's easier for everybody.
Wow. Fascinating. What is the word premium in pet foods another halo word?
Yeah, that's a marketing term. It doesn't have that
and that's so sad, because I think
it depends on who's using it.
It's like natural.
Right. That has no definition, does it, Jennifer?
No, natural
Who
does
does?
have a regulatory definition, but it's essentially
Okay.
meaningless in terms of quality and nutrition. So it basically
Oh
just
my
means that it's
gosh.
something that's not chemically
Oh my
synthesized.
gosh.
And we do so when we're giving purified vitamins and
Yes.
minerals, either as part of a commercial diet or in supplements that we take for ourselves, some of them are really sensitive. So, for example, vitamin E and vitamin A, they have a little chemical structure called a hydroxyl
Okay.
group on them that is very reactive. And we need to protect that hydroxyl group so that it's ready once it's in our body and in our cells to do what it's supposed to be doing, right? And so they put little esters and things on those hydroxyl groups to protect them. But that means that they're not natural. It doesn't mean that they're not nutritionally useful. It's actually an
Got it.
advantage. So, but it does have a health halo for sure. There's lots of regulated terms that are meaningless in terms of nutrition and quality.
Wow.
How do I know? How can I tell if my pet's nutritional needs aren't being met?
Ooh.
Yeah, that's a great
Yeah.
question. We don't have a great way to do a full nutritional
Yeah.
assessment in an individual pet. And that's because there are 40-ish essential nutrients that dogs and cats
Wow.
need. Some of them are accurately reflected in a blood panel. So, for example, you can measure vitamin
Right.
B12. We do that a lot in animals that we think have intestinal
Like you,
disease because
Janet.
it tells us.
Thanks.
No, go ahead, Jennifer. Yeah. I meant to ask you if they measured that in you, but go ahead, Dr. Larson. Yeah.
Oh, look, I don't know.
Okay.
Yeah, so vitamin B12 is the status is really well
Uh-huh.
reflected in the blood, but for other nutrients it's not. So for example, calcium. So calcium is really tightly regulated in the
Mm.
blood in a very tight level. And so even at the expense of the skeleton, like if an animal isn't getting enough calcium, they'll leach it from their skeleton to keep that blood level the same. So you can't really
Mm.
tell. So basically, what we're left with is doing sort of a general nutritional assessment on the pet. And that means everything from stool quality, coat quality,
Mm.
how are they doing
Yeah.
otherwise, all those other sort of pieces of data that you sort of put together into your puzzle, and assessing the diet. So if you told me that you thought your pet was doing great, but you were only feeding it raw venison with no supplements, that's a grossly
Right.
unbalanced diet. And we know that that needs attention.
And you know what's so sad about that, Janet? You probably don't know this, but in so many exotics, turtles, lizards, the number one reason they have problems is because humans have no knowledge about what proper diet to feed them. It's so sad.
I used to feed my pet turtle raw beef.
Well, there you
Yep,
go.
Raw
that's a
ground meat. I
classic.
remember,
There's a perfect example.
and that turtle
Yeah,
is
beef and
that
iceberg
turtle's in
lettuce,
a
right?
little
That's a
jewelry box
classic.
back in the yard, back in our house in
Okay,
Cleveland.
Janet. Okay. Oh my God.
Yeah, they get vitamin A
Oh,
deficiency really easily.
I
So,
remember I went to Ohio State, and when we were in clinics our senior year, one of my classmates who sadly passed away, he was in the Navy before he went to vet school. So he was our go-to person for turtles and amphibian stuff. A gal came in with these two sliders, turtle, the regular green turtles, this big. They bought them 25 years ago on their honeymoon in Hawaii.
oh
And
my
of course, guess what
God.
they had? Vitamin A deficiency. And we
Yeah.
called Don. Don was over in the necropsy lab doing his necropsy, and we're like, "Get Don over here!" And he knew right away, vitamin A deficiency. Yeah, so sad
Yeah, there's
that
some classic
and so
deficiencies.
sad that they suffer at our hands. Now,
Yeah,
last
well, we
Yeah,
try.
we have a lot of responsibility to
we
take care of
do.
animals, especially, I mean, domestic animals like dogs and cats, but also wild
Yes.
animals. We've chosen to bring them into our house or keep them in captivity. And that's a huge challenge for our veterinary, colleagues that work in zoos
Sure.
and in other sort of settings where there's some captive wild animals for whatever reason, because it's really difficult to assess their nutritional needs. We're left with observations in the
Mm,
wild and trying to replicate that with what we have
wow.
access to. And it's a huge challenge. They spend a lot of time thinking about nutrition in those
Do you do a
settings.
lot of consulting for zoos?
No, no, we have our Zoomed people and our
So they
exotic
handle
pet
that
people
part.
do a lot of that stuff. Sometimes we do get questions for sort of elderly dog and, feline and canine
Yeah.
species, like bobcats and those kinds of things, because we're in there in captivity. They live
Mhm.
long enough to develop the same diseases that senior dogs and cats
Wow.
do.
Yeah,
Okay,
because you're right. In the wild, they wouldn't. Yeah.
I have a feeding
Right.
question. So
Okay.
and I see them at Home Goods. Everybody's buying those elevated bowls,
Oh,
the bowl holder.
Yeah, I think those are helpful for pets that are potentially
Oh,
older and have some mobility
I thought it had
concerns.
something to do with like the
Um,
esophagus, like it's higher up. I didn't know. I had no idea. I see them everywhere.
Yeah, I mean, most of the esophagus is in the chest, and that's always going to be sort of vertical. So we do recommend upright feeding for dogs that have certain esophageal diseases, but it's more than an elevated feeder. I mean, they're
yeah.
like
Yeah.
In a
up,
chair.
like their entire chest
They're
has to
like
be
sitting up.
vertical.
Yeah. And then
Hmm.
there's those
Yeah.
ones, the bowls that have, and I've seen these voracious dog eaters, right? And
Oh,
they
the
have like
Yes.
slow
this,
feeders.
yeah, which I think is kind of cool.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, there's lots of strategies that we use to slow animals down, partly because, again, just like for captive wild
Yeah.
animals, we need to make sure that they're spending an appropriate amount of time looking for, finding, and eating their food. But the same goes for our dogs and cats. And this becomes a challenge when we have them on weight loss
Mm-hmm.
plans and we're not giving them adequate, like, mental enrichment and something else to think about other than when's dinner time,
Yeah.
when's breakfast, when's dinner
Yeah.
time,
Like when
when's
you're in the
breakfast. And
hospital, that's
so,
all you look forward to.
yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know. The food's pretty bad.
Ugh. What about Dr. Larson? I remember having a couple of patients that had great owners, dogs, that had great owners, and they couldn't get these dogs to lose weight for all the tea in China, no pun intended. And they were on prescription weight loss diets. But I read that genetically, you can have a fat gene. They found it in dogs and they found it in people. Now, how often do you see that?
Yeah, it's really common for weight loss to be very challenging. So
Yes.
retrievers have those genes where they're essentially never full, right? Like they have
Wow.
this huge appetite, and in cats. And the reason why weight loss is not working in those animals is because they're not being appropriately restricted. So you can get weight loss to occur on any
Okay.
diet, but people often get the impression that you just put them on a weight loss diet and weight loss is going to
Yeah.
happen magically. And that's not true. You have to keep restricting them. So figuring out the amount of calories to start with and what diet to
Hmm.
feed and all of that, that's really the baseline part of it, but it's not the important part of the weight loss plan. The important part and the crucial part, and you're going to fail if you're not doing this, is to keep monitoring their body weight and then adjusting their intake in response to what their body weight is doing. So if they're not losing weight or if they're even gaining, you need to reduce the amount you're feeding and keep doing that
That
over and
makes
over and
sense.
over.
They're not using those.
Yeah, we get that question
I
all the
bet.
time.
Yeah.
They're not using those diet injectables on.
No.
No, there's some interest in that, but I think there's some potentially things we need to wrestle with in terms of
Hmm.
ethics and
Sure.
safety. There was also at least one published paper looking at essentially like a gastric bypass in people,
Really?
looking at that in cats. But again,
Mm.
there's some ethics things
Yes.
to wrestle with because weight loss is very simple in
Hmm.
theory. In practice, trying to get the owner's behavior so that they're adequately restricting while controlling the hunger of the pet is really
Yeah.
important because as you know, cats are going to get on your bed and scream in your face at
And
3
food
a.m.,
is
right?
love.
Dogs
Yeah.
are, yeah, dogs are going to start
Yeah.
scavenging and acting, maybe they're going to start eating poop and those kinds of
Yeah.
things. So we're often trying to manage their feeling of fullness, and that can be a very big challenge because that's going to sabotage your weight loss
Well,
plan.
speaking of that, can you comment on fiber sources like canned pumpkin, things that people ask about? Well, what can I give
Fiber
him to fill
One.
him up? What?
Fiber
Yeah,
One.
fiber is so underappreciated. It's not considered an essential nutrient, but it's so important for health and
Hmm.
disease.
Huh.
And I think it's actually one of the nutrients that is overlooked and is missing in a lot of the homemade style commercial diets, homemade
Yes.
diets, raw diets,
Yes.
etc. And so fiber is like the
Oops.
weight loss diets that are veterinary therapeutic diets are going to be high in fiber. That's one of the strategies that they use to dilute out the
Okay.
calories and help them feel full. If you need
Wow.
additional sort of fiber support, using things like, I mean, canned pumpkin is fine. It's just mostly
Yeah.
water, so it's very little fiber for the amount that you're giving. So sometimes we'll use things like wheat bran or just like a purified fiber source like psyllium husk powder. I really like the Fiber One cereals and All Bran and those kinds of things. It's just those add calories too. So you just have to build that into your plan and pay attention to the amount of calories coming from those.
You know, I had to work with one of mine. I have a golden rescue from China, Gidget, and she had anal gland issues. And so Janet will tell you, because Janet just went to the GI specialist, and guess what she's on? Fiber One, which the veterinarian told her I give my dogs a little bit of Fiber One every day.
And probiotics.
Yeah, I know. But anyway, I just love Fiber One. My girls love it. Yeah. But you just got to find out how much to use. Yeah.
And I will tell you,
a little can go a long way, but we're not good at getting enough fiber.
Right. Oh, absolutely we're not.
Fiber One stays crunchy. The other one, what was the other one? Fiber.
All Bran?
No, Janet, I told you to get Fiber One, the things that look like a little squiggly.
Yeah, but there's a competitor. There's Fiber One.
Oh, I don't know that one.
Whatever the other one was.
The one with the least amount of sugar in it.
It was like mush. It was disgusting. Fiber One stays crunchy. And it's actually quite tasty, and it's very low sugar.
Yeah, it is.
I don't think there's any added sugar.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Yeah, sometimes things are surprising that provide, like raspberries have quite a bit of fiber, dried cranberries,
Lentils.
Of course, garbanzo beans and all those kinds of things as well.
Okay, so I got to ask Dr. Larsen our question. How did you become passionate about your work? Like, how did this all...
Yeah, what drove you into nutrition? Because you've been into nutrition way the heck back.
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm a little unusual because that's why I went to vet school to kind of do what I'm doing. I didn't want to be a veterinarian even after I started graduate school. Yeah, I was very ignorant about what vets did. My impression was that being a veterinarian meant that you did spays and neuters and gave vaccines, and that wasn't that exciting to me.
I could see that, sure.
Yeah, I was very ignorant about it. And then once I got into graduate school, I was working with veterinarians that were doing a dual residency in nutrition to be specialists and PhDs. And working with them and helping them with their research projects, I was like, oh, this is more like what I want to do. So I had actually started my PhD program and then applied to veterinary school. So I was really fortunate that I was in a place where I got exposed to that as a career option. And was able to pursue it and, successfully secured a faculty position.
What was your thesis on, your PhD thesis?
Amino acid bioavailability.
Oh, cool. Wow.
Yeah. So individual amino acids are sometimes damaged by processing or maybe if they're too low, but you can't really tell that by looking at the global protein digestibility. So I was trying to figure out, are there lab tests that we can do to assess that? And is it different between species and those kinds of things? And I love amino acids.
Oh, yeah, that is so cool.
Do you have pets?
Yeah, I have dogs.
And who are they?
I have 2 French bulldogs and a Dalmatian.
Oh my gosh.
Interesting. Who's the boss?
Probably, I mean, who thinks
Okay,
they're the boss? Who's the actual boss? Yeah, my male French bulldog thinks he's the boss. For sure.
Male. Oh, but the female rules the roost, always.
Yeah, but she's very conflict averse. She wants the path of least resistance. I think it's laziness. But...
So let me ask you this. How much of your knowledge of nutrition in different species spills over into how you eat? I'm just curious.
I mean, I love to talk about food and think about food. So, but I mean, one of the reasons why I went to school for so long and I stayed like in the academy was that I like learning things, and I learn things every day from my clients, from my patients, from the people I'm surrounded by. I have the luxury, and I'm so fortunate I can walk down the hallway and ask somebody a question. And I graduated from veterinary school in 2004, which wasn't an eon ago. It feels like a long time ago, but there's drugs that we use all the time now, or tests that are available that we weren't exposed to in veterinary school. So I'll be reading through a medical record for one of my cases. I'm like, what does this mean? And I'll just get up and walk down the hallway and be like, hey, what is this?
Yeah.
So I feel like I am, very happy to ask questions, and I I love sort of figuring out what I don't know because then I can sort of figure out what we do know. And I also have the ability to do some research and answer some questions and push some knowledge forward. So I've been really
You know,
fortunate.
Carl said the same thing, and I feel the same way. I really think that veterinarians are a group of eternal learners, that we love
Yeah,
learning, and it's certainly it would applies to our profession, but just kind of global learning. I mean, it's just so much
yeah,
fascination out there. Yeah.
right. There's no shame in not knowing
Right.
something. The shame should be in not
Right.
asking or having the intellectual curiosity to figure that
I'm
out.
Ignorance
very
is the
good at saying,
shame.
I don't get it. I don't know. Can you explain that to me?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
No, I love that.
And I think that's also very, that attitude, I think, is very engaging for students to
Yep.
see us
Oh, yeah.
model
That's a good point.
because we're supposed to be mentoring
Yeah.
them
Yeah.
and we want them to be lifelong
Yes.
learners. That's one of our missions at the university and veterinary medicine in
And I
general.
think that's true for pet owners too. They like to learn. Sometimes I
Yeah.
know I would talk and I could see people's eyes rolling back in the head, but I thought, you know what? If I explain why I'm doing this, maybe
Right.
then they'll get it and they'll be more compliant than here. Just take this and do this. It's all about
Hmm.
communication, really.
Okay, so we got to wrap it up, and I got to ask the question. Dr.
Oh,
Larson, what is your pet or human peeve?
my
Or
pet or
human?
human
She's
peeve.
pretty happy. I don't think we're going to get. I don't
Ah,
think we're going to get a
everyone's got
negative
something that
answer.
pisses them off.
I'm a pretty accepting person. I was raised by
Ooh,
hippies.
oh, I love
Um,
that. I
'Cause
did
you're
sit-ins in
Californian.
undergrad. See, I could be her parent.
Okay, I have
Okay.
one. I think I one thing that I don't like is, the sort of trend of referring to animals as fur babies and those kinds of
Oh,
things because
oh.
to me, being a dog or a cat, it's more than good
Right.
enough. Why we don't have to try to modify
You can't
that
get better than
existence and that
that.
identity.
Right.
Yeah.
I
That's a
know.
good one. That's a good one. Kind
No,
of
it
like all
is
these little girls,
because
princess.
we
Like
hold
why?
them in such high regard.
Yeah.
As I tell Janet, when I'm walking at the park or something, when I see a stroller coming to me, I'm so disappointed when there's a human in there.
So
When there's a
true.
pet in there, I'm like, oh,
Oh my God, score!
yeah.
And it can't
Yeah.
walk, you know?
Right. Right.
Extra credit.
Yeah, I guess I feel very strongly about letting dogs be
Yeah.
dogs and letting cats be cats and sort of respect who they
Yes.
are. So maybe that's sort of a related thing, but trying to sort of force touch and hug on animals that clearly are not interested, like they don't know you and those
Yeah.
kinds of things. I mean, we have to do that in veterinary medicine settings, but if I'm out in public, I very rarely will touch a strange animal unless they solicit it.
Absolutely. Yes.
People ignore what they want and need all the time. And I think we need to pay better attention to all the beings
I
around
don't
Yes.
us.
like making an animal feel uncomfortable. I went to my friend Martha's house and she
Yes.
has a yellow lab who, is like, and then
Yeah.
she has like a terrier mix. And the yellow lab, I'm opening up the big thing of biscuits I brought, and the yellow lab's already had like four, and the terrier was like, uh-uh. And
Oh,
I put it on the ground and I just kind of walked away and thought,
yeah.
on your own time. And then he warmed up to me, but you could just
Yeah, well,
see,
you come on kind of strong, though.
I know. And the lab was like, sucking all the air out of the room,
Yeah,
was eating like 10 biscuits. And I'm like, okay, that's enough.
But that was very
I think
respectful,
it,
right? Like you didn't rush over and pick him
Oh,
up. If I was
yeah.
a tiny
oh
dog,
no.
I would hate to be picked up all the
Oh,
time.
Hey,
yeah.
when I go to pick up our male cat, Atticus, it's like this. It's
Yeah.
just coming
He
closer.
does,
Oh
he
my
hates
God, oh
it.
my God. And I just walk away
Yeah.
because he just doesn't like me. So,
Well, I've always said, no matter what species you are, some of us have personal space.
yeah.
And we like
Right.
our personal space. I don't like when someone comes up to me and they back me in
No,
the wall and they're talking like
no,
that. I'm like, I
no.
got it. Yeah.
Except for the guy who was
Couldn't agree
sitting
more.
next to
Noted.
me. I was at an event on Saturday or Sunday, and this guy's sitting next to me, and I look, and he has on Ohio State national champions. I'm in
Oh,
Connecticut.
Jesus.
And I just kind of lean over this 20-year-old and I go, OH. And he goes, oh, IO. Oh my God. And we
When
had
you
a
say that
moment.
to me, I like have a 5 second delay. I'm like, what is she talking about? Oh, that's right. IO. Yeah.
I kind of made his day.
The only reason I know that is because of Carl.
Yeah. Oh, geez. You listen, I knew Carl when he was going to go into ophthalmology. He was just a
Wow.
young guy. Yeah, we were together because I was doing I was trailing the dermatologist. He was trailing the ophthalmologist. And so we just kind of meshed. Yeah.
Well, you were thinking ophthalmology too.
I know, but I hate surgery. That's why I love derm.
Oh.
To me,
I didn't like
surgery
the
is
eyeballs in the refrigerator in a jar. That was so
I have
gross.
the greatest respect for surgeons. All my friends that are surgeons, they better not retire because I just, yeah.
Yeah, I do not have the adrenals for that. No, thank you.
No.
Mm-mm.
You know, and
Nor
I
do
always
I.
got a headache from the anesthesia. I swear to God I did. You're standing there and it's supposed to be, the rescue unit. Every time, either that or I was so stressed out that I
Oh, you
come
mean
out
it's
of
like
there.
going into the air and you're sucking
the
it in?
worst headache. Yeah.
Oh.
I mean, ideally not. Yeah, but you're hot. You
It
have
was
a mask
horrible.
and a gown.
And you're standing
sweating.
in the same position for like a couple hours. You go to pick up your foot and it like weighs 20 pounds. It's
There's
odd.
blood. Ugh.
Yeah, it is physically
Blood needs
uncomfortable.
to
for
stay
sure.
inside.
That's optimal.
Well, Dr. Larsen, this has
This has been so fun. Thank you so
interesting and
much.
so informative. Now I'm going to go look at my
That was
dog
fun.
food.
Janet, we got to start throwing around the halo
Get in
thing.
the bag.
Yeah, that's a good word. Health halo. Oh, that's bullshit.
Yep.
That's a health halo. There you go.
Marketing, right.
Marketing.
Thank you so much, Dr.
Thank you,
Larsen.
Dr. Larsen.
Janet, we
It was
need
a
to wrap it up.
You're welcome. Thank you.
This is Dr. Alice Novotny-Jerome and
Janet Novotny King saying thanks for listening. Thanks for following. We appreciate you.
don't forget to like us and follow us.
Thank you.
Hey, thanks for watching.
And listening.
We like likes.
Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You can follow us on social media at Speaking of Pets.
And give your pets a big kiss from the Novotny sisters.
The Speaking of Pets podcast is an SLA video production.